All right, welcome to the Straight Red Card, and Brett and I are going to break down the USA versus Belgium match. First of all, Brett, let's just start with all the ESPN bashing, and you can bash ESPN for a lot of things, I guess, over the years, as far as soccer goes. But can we just calm down a little about the NASCAR thing, the U.S. Open thing, and the Little League World Series? I mean, listen. We're not expecting ESPN to interrupt things that are already happening. That's not going to happen. And when NASCAR, let's face it, that's where the bucks are, and that's where a huge fan base is.
Advertising money.
Yeah, I mean you're just gonna, as a soccer fan, can you just? And we've come a long ways, but can we calm down just a little about the criticism?
Yeah, and here's the thing. ESPN wasn't expecting the Little League World Series to go into extra innings. I mean, they could have accounted for it, but that's an extra half-hour slot that they're missing out on.
Was it extra innings? I thought that the game just went longer than they thought.
I thought it went to extra. I mean, I didn't watch it. I assumed that it went to extra innings.
No, I think it was just went on longer than they thought. Yeah. Okay,
then that may be the problem. That maybe that may be something you could fault ESPN for, technically speaking. The NASCAR aspect was delayed because of weather. As you pointed out, NASCAR is more profitable for ESPN. Quite frankly, I mean, there's advertisements all over the place, whether it's showing the actual race itself on all the cars or in commercial breaks.
Yeah.
I mean, there's more money in that than there is in showing a soccer match, and that's how it is.
That's just a fact.
Sorry. And if a NASCAR race is set for a specific time frame, they're not going to turn it over and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, there's a U.S.-Belgium game that's scheduled for this time frame, so
and it's a friendly.
We got to cut this off and let's show the game."
It's a friendly.
I personally would have loved it if they did that.
Sure.
However, I can understand their take on it. They moved it to ESPN2 because the U.S. Open was rained out or whatever.
Thank God.
For whatever weather reason. And and people are still able to go on and watch it on ESPN3. If they don't have that capabilities, I'm assuming most people have an Xbox 360 or a PlayStation 3 for the most part.
Yeah.
So it is very visible for the bulk of the people.
Yeah.
Regardless of how you are going to see it,
or turn on the news and
exactly.
I didn't, I taped the wrong thing too, but I watched it later.
I recorded the NASCAR match. This is what I did. I mean, I came home like, crap, there's NASCAR on. Well, I mean, I ended up having to wait until the game was over to watch the replay on ESPN3, but I was still able to do it. And I think a lot of this criticism is unfair because I think a lot of U.S. fans, just soccer fans in general, feel entitled. This is the world sport. We deserve to have, the president's over a small sport like NASCAR.
Yeah, a small sport like NASCAR.
I was joking around.
Yeah, I mean, I don't watch NASCAR, but
no, neither do I. But, I know it's a massive sport here in the States, and it's big money.
Yeah.
But people have to accept it. They have to understand that this was out of their control. ESPN could not control the weather.
All right, so let's move on. How about the Belgium game? Let's just start there, and let's start with Klinsmann's assertion prior to, and I think after, the game, that he is looking to create or build an American style of the game. And my first thought when he said that, Brett, was we had an American style. You may not have liked it very much, but starting in '94, or even maybe a little before that, I think that we had this reputation, at least, of being kind of a real athletic, rough and tumble, grits and guts. Brian McBride, I think, throughout the years sort of embodied that with his metal plate in his forehead and his bloody, face.
Leave it all on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had an American style. You may not have liked it, but it was a style.
That's the problem. That's the problem. A lot of people didn't like the necessary the blue collar team. They're like, well, why can't we play a possession game? Why can't we control the field? We got talented players, and we do. Yeah. Nothing against the players that we're playing. However, we're not seeing the offensive take on it. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing Josie is isolated up top completely.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw it against not necessarily against Costa Rica because Costa Rica didn't pressure us in the first half of the match. But in the Belgium game, Josie was completely isolated in the sea of red. That's all it was. They're playing crosses to Josie when there's 4 or 5 defenders marking up on him. I don't like my odds.
Yeah,
I really don't.
Right.
And it's something that we need to fix. If we continue playing a 4-5-1, we need to figure out a midfield pairing, perhaps a center mid pairing, moving Dempsey and Landon back out wide where they, I mean, in my opinion, where they necessarily belong, because what they can bring to the team, but bringing in more center midfield players that play box to box, because with Torres, he's creating a lot of chances here and there. He's making some really nice passes. I like him. However, he's not a box-to-box midfielder. And you're playing Adu pretty much as a center back, more or less a stopper, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And there's this huge gap between crashing the box and playing a center mid position that we don't have. We're not crashing. When we saw Belgium, they had 4, 5 to 6 players all in the box area.
Yeah.
On all their opportunities.
Right. Whenever
we had our opportunities, they were all off set plays, or it came late in the match when we decided to start pressing the match.
Yeah, I mean,
we weren't creating anything because we weren't crashing the box with numbers.
No, I mean, we certainly weren't. But to get back to Klinsmann's assertion too, before I comment on the one striker on top business, which is, there is an assertion being made by a lot of people that this next generation of young American players, in many ways, are a little too soft to play the kind of blue-collar American style of soccer that we saw throughout the 90s. And
which players you look at.
And the 2000s. Yeah, I mean, the early 2000s. It's, they're just, you look at some of the players, and like Freddie Adu, and I'm not singling him out. There are a lot of other players like this, too. And I'm not going to name them all because I don't want to get on everybody's hate list, but there are a lot of guys that just certainly just don't have those. They don't have the big brass ones. Surely there are some guys out there like that. I would say Dempsey's a tough guy, although he takes a fall kind of easy. There are tough guys on the team now, but this is not 2002. This is not those guys, and so maybe we really don't have any choice in the long run, but to change our style, not necessarily to create. We're not going to create an American style of soccer because we had one. So what we're going to do is transform the style of American soccer into something different. And I think that's what we're talking about. But now we're talking about a guy like Altidore, as you mentioned, playing up basically all by himself. And let's face it, this 4-3-3 that we keep talking about, it's just,
quote unquote.
Yeah, it's not a 4-3-3. I played in 4-3-3s. I know what they're supposed to look like. I think you've played in them too. We know what a 4-3-3 generally, at least for many, many years, what that meant. And that meant that you didn't play 3 very centrally situated center midfielders and then have guys like Shea and Rogers who's supposed to be, really in a traditional old 4-3-3, more offensive-minded. Well, they're, as you said, I mean, they're tracking back. They're playing defense all the way to the back. How are they supposed to get up?
Back. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is that we should call this what it is. And I think, maybe there's some PR going on here, because if a lot of people don't like the idea of us playing a 4-5-1, because a lot of people don't like us playing one striker up top. But let's face it, that's what's going on. And you mentioned no one in the box. There's no one in the box to receive anything. So how are you going to score? How are you going to create opportunities?
I thought Tight Shirt Twelman, the nickname that I think I originated.
I think
but it caught on like wildfire. Yeah, however,
I hope so.
I think he pointed it out perfectly that Josie was so isolated in both matches. Really, he was, and we're looking at the fact that we don't have that many opportunities. We possess the ball so nicely within the first 2/3 of the field. However, when we get in that last third of the field, we get the ball out wide to Shea or Rogers, and they're crossing it to just Josie with 4 or 5 defenders around him, and that's not what we need. It's not how we're gonna put. We're not gonna score it, and we've only had 1 goal so far.
Yeah, and that's not what any 4-3-3 I ever played in looked like. We were offensive-minded folks.
Exactly. So there's no way we can classify this as a 4-3-3 because, like you said, we saw Shea, we saw Rogers getting back as far as the back line. That's not what we expect as far as our wing strikers to an extent.
Right. And as a right midfielder playing a 4-3-3, granted it was back in the 80s, and some of it, in Germany and some here in the United States, I can tell you this, and doesn't matter which occasion it was, my responsibility as a right midfielder wasn't centrally focused. I had to come in. I had to suck in when the ball was on the left side of the field, certainly. But when the ball was on the right side of the field, I had a lot of responsibilities to go out there and be wide and get out there and defend and allow my right forward in front of me the opportunity for when there was a turnover to look for open space so I could get him the ball and get it up the field and start that attack with those 3 forwards. And that is just not what we're seeing. And I think we've emphasized, or Klinsmann's emphasized, that the wingers have to get back and they have to participate in the defense. And I agree with that. But they're participating to such a level, they might as well be right backs and left backs sometimes. We might as well be playing a 6-3-1.
Well, and you got to also take into the fact we also saw Trundle, we saw Chandler bypassing Shea and Rogers
often
to get that cross. I mean, these are wing backs getting beyond the wing strikers,
right?
In this formation, so that doesn't point out to me that this is a 4-3-3. This points out to me more of a 4-5-1, like we were mentioning, or 4-1-4-1, however you want to describe it. However, another comment that I'd like to bring up about us as far as our 3 midfielder, our quote unquote 3 midfielders, is we're seeing a lot of players that can possess the ball, make nice passes, make everything nice within the first 2/3. However, the final third is the problem because we're not getting enough people up front.
Right.
I think the thing comes down to is that we don't have any true box-to-box midfielders. You have a dude who is pretty much playing a center back position against Belgium. I mean, there were times where he was beyond Boca or Goodson.
Yeah, he's just a third center back, honestly.
That's pretty much what it was. And somebody actually mentioned that it was basically a 5-4-1 formation. And I mean, we're missing players who can play box to box, who are like the Michael Bradley's, Jermaine Jones to an extent, even Clark. Who make the runs for. And, I honestly think that Adu has played improperly here because even with Rangers, he's more of a box-to-box midfielder rather than a pure defensive mid.
Right.
And we don't have the players crashing. So maybe it comes down to the player selection, or maybe it's just the fact that Klinsmann can't ask for every single A-team player for each international friendly to play. Who knows? We'll see once qualifying starts what happens and who he's playing.
Sure.
With the current roster, with the current formation, I don't think that the qualifications are going to be in our benefit. Although I think we'll still do well enough to qualify to the hexagon.
So.
I would imagine so. We're still very talented players, even with the players we're bringing in.
Yeah. Even with all the experimentation. Yeah.
Exactly. And. Nothing against the players we're bringing in, but it's not our A team. It really isn't. We haven't seen Donovan and Dempsey together.
No.
We haven't seen Jones, Bradley with everybody else. Even Holden, for that matter, because I think you're mentioning Holden to an extent. He's coming back into the fold.
Yep. And with Holden, honestly, that could open things up because Holden can play out in the wing. He can play that box to box role. Almost the same spot where Torres does. I think he does a great job at Bolton, controlling the field, distributing the balls. I think he's just a bigger, faster, better Torres.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean that Torres doesn't have a role somewhere, but I just think he's going to be better and better at it if he comes back from this. And